Okay. Abram, let's go. Abram.
Yeah, okay.
Go.
Great, so thank you everyone for coming. My name's Neil, I'm a third year medical student.
And I'm Tiff, I'm also third year medical student.
So we'll start off by introducing the speakers from left to right. So first we've got Uday Tavija. He is the founder and CEO of Oxbridge AIX and supports over 320 startups, over 2,000 innovators across
Now 500. Yeah.
over 500 innovators. Over 500 startups, over 2,000 innovators across Oxford and Cambridge. His network has helped founders raise over 34 million dollars.
Just the finest. Let's just define this
Just
from the Oxford Challenge, so it's well north of that.
Oh, solid. Enter top accelerators, including Y Combinator and Techstars. He's also a former MedTech private equity and founder of AI startup Tuki.
So this person here is This is Sumitra, and he's a global healthcare strategy leader, and he's got 20 plus years in 3 different continents. So he's currently a senior VP at Vamstar, and he specializes in market access, pricing, and embedding AI to basically help improve patient access and decision making.
Okay. Next up, we've got Dr. Alex Coombs, who is an NHS doctor and healthcare innovation leader. He does a lot of work with early stage founders via a program like Learn to Innovate, works with the Royal College of Surgeons of England, Innovation Hub, and is passionate about empowering the next wave of health tech innovators.
Last but definitely not least is James. He is an award-winning tech strategist and a clean innovation advocate. So he works with a lot of clean tech and energy. And he's advised global giants, including Google, Microsoft, and he's also co-founded UK's first B2B storytelling agency. And he's also authored a best-selling book called Humanizing B2B.
Okay. Great, so that's our introductions. But what we thought would be nice is if we get the speakers to do their own versions of that. So we will give everyone a moment to share what you're working on, as well as what current goals you have and areas of interest. So can we start with Uday?
Okay, so I've been exposed to MedTech for now 13 years, and it was my first job. I was very lucky. 2 of the richest Indians in America basically had an obsession with trying to solve diseases that their family had. And so they would buy old technologies and find ways to repackage them, and then that led to buying more companies. And so I was employee number 7 for their family office, but my job was to help them commercialize the tech. And it was really fun. At the time, healthcare in India was the industry, and I was being mentored by the previous Governor General. So I got very lucky. I got taught a lot of different things from really cool people, and that's been very useful because we work with over 60 AI life science startups. And healthcare is it's one of those things where you're either really passionate and ethical, or you're really greedy. and so it's quite fascinating finding that balance and enabling the people who are more of the former.
Yeah, hi, this is Soumitra here. I started my journey 23 years back from management consulting. Come from a finance background, so initially I had no knowledge about MedTech. Then gradually I got all the projects into the MedTech space, and that's how I built my capability over a period of time. Recently what we did prior to this COVID scenario, we started looking at how to use technology to address some of the problems, and that's where we formed a company called Vamstar, wherein we looked at a specific problem of how tenders are being managed in MedTech space. And since there are so many data silos across various geographies, this was a huge problem for commercial agents and also from the buyer side, wherein all the hospitals or GPOs was struggling to consolidate their demands and running through those. So we built those platforms wherein we map, I think, 86,000 plus buyers globally. We run through millions and millions of pages every day, extract the data, structure that data, and then we are able to provide solutions which also includes like now predictive analytics on top of it. So we have done a lot of interesting work recently, and I can just discuss that subsequently when we come up to it. So over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. So as I said, there was a doctor working in the NHS, but taking time out to do more work supporting ventures in the MedTech space, but also I still support my trust with their EPR program. For those of you not aware of the term EPR, electronic patient record, we're moving from a paper format to digital format because we still write papers. It's crazy. It still happens out there. So yeah, I spend a lot of my time now supporting ventures in the MedTech space through the London Institute for Healthcare Engineering, is where I spend 3 days of my time.
Sorry.
It's all right.
It's like Band-Aid.
Sorry.
You guys got lots of busy lectures and things, it's fine, don't worry. But I think what's quite interesting for all of you is obviously I'm not that far ahead of all of you. I imagine most of you medical students in the room, some yes, some no, half.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm not that far ahead of you in terms of where I'm at. So I've gone on quite an interesting journey. I realised that I loved innovation in technology when I was a medical student. So actually, just like you guys have set up this MedTech society, when I did my degree in Imperial in surgery and innovation, I love surgery, but then I fell in love with innovation bit of healthcare and realised how it can improve patient outcomes. I decided to go back to Cardiff and realised for me there wasn't a lot of opportunity. So I set up something just like this, but it was a programme dedicated to supporting students to actually not just learn about innovation, but have a go at doing something innovative and show them it's not that scary and actually you can do these things. So I set the Learn to Innovate programme. We trained over 70 plus students. Some of them won Innovate UK grants their ideas to get them off the ground. And then I kind of went into some other aspects of innovation. So I did an elective with a digital consent company called Concentric. I also then support the Royal College of Surgeons Innovation Hub. And I guess my passion is around supporting MedTech ventures, so from that sort of like commercial aspect, which I do in Leahy at the moment, but also supporting students and future doctors to actually be able to apply these amazing technologies that are coming through. We're in this amazing era of digital technologies, AI, and also medical devices, but particularly digital technologies. And we need to train our doctors how to actually apply these technologies safely and effectively. So I'm also very passionate about the medical student level, how to actually use these technologies, something that we haven't, I think we've quite addressed yet.
Me, James, so I'm kind of the outsider here, I think, because I'm nothing to do with medicine and tech. I'm a bit of biotech and some quantum stuff. But going back, I've got about 30 years in tech, innovation, disruption sometimes. But that was all inspired by actually when I was a kid. My dad was a big farmer, and he got moved up through the ranks as you do, moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where we were HQ'd, and the closer he got to the centre, the more he realised how unbelievably hypocritical it was. And then having left South Africa when I was very small, having to leave everything behind back then, you could take money out, because my parents were political, you had to literally come over here with no accommodation, legally immigrate. Came here, we went to America, Dad had restarted his career, yay, suddenly had a nice house again and pool, yay. He literally walked out again, came back to the UK, downsized, and he spent about a year or two thinking about things, and he got into eventually clean energy. He was able to eventually work with Al Gore and Nelson Mandela, lobbying for clean energy by platinum fuel cells. And that inspired me and my brother, and it sounds weird, but actually to genuinely have a life plan, which was, like my brother's very mathsy, my mom's very mathsy, so I wanted to zag, go the other way, so I went into the science, but I really love maths. I was kind of like I was a chess player and I did maths Olympiads and things, but I thought, I want to work with my brother, so let's do complementary things. So I was a coder, but I studied journalism and English. And what I found when I came out of uni was that coding was a lot better paid than anything to do with journalism. So I did a bit of that. Y2K, Millennium Bug, the older people around here will know that helped save the world. It wasn't common, honestly. But I came back to the UK in about 2000, helped Tesco digitalise, which is a whole other story. They literally didn't have email in HQ at that point. My head of HR said me putting a computer on her desk was absolutely anathema to everything HR stood for. That's where they stood. And I realised, my God, people don't get how technology is going to change everything. So I said, right, okay, let's use some of those journalistic English skills and some of those coding, sort of techie geek skills to maybe help technology companies articulate what they do. So I went to a big agency. The favourite quote I love to give from the MD, I've done weeks of research for this big pitch for a .com, really early .com company, early social network, you won't have heard of it. And as they walked this guy in, I was too junior to be in the pitch, but as they walked in, the managing director of such and such, he said to him, what are you going to do when this whole internet thing blows over? Because it's a bit of a fad. So I quit that day, joined a technology-focused startup in the agency world. We grew incredibly quickly. And I believe since it's all about the intersection of things. So the plan was always to end up working with my brother. He worked at various consultancies. He's now a VC into clean tech. He's one of Europe's largest. Had some high-profile failures, but some high-profile successes, as you do. I work with a lot of his companies now. And it's about the combination of things, which is exciting. For me, that's where it gets interesting. And so I don't know MedTech that well, but I've seen areas like virtualization of computing, where the hardware guys wouldn't even talk to the software guys. In fact, they hated each other. And combining the two, that's where it gets interesting. And I've seen a lot of lessons from those sort of 25 years since 2000, where it's about unintended consequences. It's about really good ideals, which get subverted. So Google, I remember when they came to work with us, they said, look, you probably haven't heard of us. We're like Ask Jeeves, but better. And I was like, yeah, actually I have heard of you. So I worked with them for sort of 15-ish years. And I saw them going from being a really awesome company to being a not so awesome company. And again, claim to fame, I fired them because they'd become so far from what I thought was the intentions they started the business with. And I've seen that over and over again. And how do we stop repeating those mistakes in such an important area as MedTech is something I think is really interesting. Anyone would stop there.
Would you like to introduce the topic?
You've got your laptop.
Fine. If you could tell. Alright, so now we've had our speakers introduce themselves. I'll do a brief overview on the topic that we are speaking about today. So we're talking about the future of technology and AI in medicine. And as we could sort of infer from what we've been hearing, technology is becoming increasingly relevant in clinical practice. For example, as Alex said, patient records are moving online, telemedicine is becoming increasingly popular. And on the more technical side of things, AI models are being developed and approved to optimize workflows. In diagnostics, radiology, those are the sort of fields that I've seen through my reading. Basically automating simpler processes right now. So on that note, I'd encourage everyone to get involved, ask any questions that you have to our speakers. Yeah, I'd like to open the floor to everyone.
That's going to be that Tom moment, isn't it?
Well, my question was about, you just spoke about how AI is coming into diagnostics. And I think one of the biggest, in my opinion, challenges with that is that all we know is what we put into that model, which is based off of only stuff that we know. And well, whenever it comes to diagnostics, there is obviously the aspect of making judgments on the basis of information that we do know, but there's always something new that could potentially come out that we'd miss if we use just AI workflows that are built and trained over these models. So I don't know, I was thinking, what is the way to overcome that trend?
So it will take time. So, okay, one of the major things in MedTech space is the trust factor which comes in picture, and how much do you trust those diagnostic reports as such. So just to give you an example now, Nihon Koden has a product wherein you could give the blood sample, it will detect so many other things apart from the normal blood test. it took them so many years just to get to the stage where people would trust that element of it, the AI coming up with it. So there's so many other aspects which AI is currently operating as a black box, wherein you put in certain inputs, you expect certain outputs, and how the models are being built. The challenge, like I'm working on something like a value AI kind of a project, wherein we are building models or knowledge stacks, the way they structure it, wherein data structuring is being done by subject matter experts. And they are not coders or anything or any of that sort, so they have to understand the data so that we know what's going in the models to understand and build trust on those models. So it's getting into that stage wherein you have to build the capability of not just, let's say, your coding expertise or engineering capabilities, you also have to have medical backgrounds to evaluate those models, whether they are making sense or not, whether they are detecting the, because in, let's say, in a diagnostic, if you diagnose a patient with something, there are so many elements which are not captured as part of the data itself. So how do you match that? And that's where we are bringing in that kind of element, wherein we are incorporating the subject matter expertise, let's say health economists, the medical practitioners, to build and trust those models. And that's like we are working with one of the largest pharma companies in that space. This is not MedTech, but in pharma space, wherein they are building these models, which will be like, it's a big like 10-year project kind of a thing, where we are building these kinds of knowledge stacks and models to work on it. So while the models are being run by engineers, they are designing those, but the stacks and the data interpretations are being done by medical experts.
Can I build on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talk in my circles sometimes. So if I could, one is the way we understand medicine, right, is that we made an observation, and all observations, whether it's traditional medicine or what we have in the West, it's been the same kind of observation to result, right? So the machine doing that is no different. So in India, doctors can be quite famous and primarily the reason they're famous is because they see more patients a day. On average, they go through 200 patients a day, right? If you see a pattern, our brains are very good at seeing patterns, way better than any AI. If you do that, if you expose yourself to that, you're going to become much better at seeing certain things. Within the context of the technologies that we're seeing, in diagnostics, for example, we have a startup who's applying this here that just pays attention to the sound that your organs are making in order to be able to see patterns for diagnostics. The fascinating element, so this is kind of like going beyond your question now, it's within diagnostics, it's how do you make healthcare cost effective, right? That's disruption. And some countries are pushing forward in this more than others because their goal, so Saudi Arabia, their goal is not to make as much money out of MedTech as possible. Their goal is to make their people happier. So they want a lot of AI in the space in order to make it much cheaper, because then that's actually, cost savings is not how you sell something. You sell something to a hospital, you basically teach them how they can make more money. 40% of all hospitals make, not in NHS, but in private, make their money from just selling stents. So there's a lot to uncover. I'm going to try not to go on a rant right now, but there's a lot to uncover in this. But I think this is just a natural step that is necessary.
It feels a bit like, and I get that there's that classic federalist view, AI is either very real, it's going to hallucinate everything, get it all wrong, or it's going to be very reductive again with kind of a soup of greyness we already knew. And again, I think what I've seen, for instance, I remember being blown away by Dentsu, Japanese, a big network. Because in my industry, it was like, AI is going to kill creativity. That was the general idea. It's like, this is just going to turn everything into grey mush, copywriting, design, whatever. And that's not an unreasonable thing to say. But what I saw from what Dentsu were doing was that actually, yes, there was crazy stuff. They had an AI CD, and this is a while ago. Because it's not just it was replicating what a typical creative director sort of CD was doing. Actually, it was able to compute and draw in so many more variables with such a kind of sense of granularity, which a human just can't really do. They would come up with ideas which we would never have dreamt of. And actually some of them were weird and not workable at all, but using kind of adversarial processes, it would then whittle them down to frankly brilliant stuff. And so, as an industry, creative industry, again, you think, well, it's not as clearly far fewer safeguards than medicine. But I think the parallel is the expectation was that AI couldn't be creative, especially from a bunch of people who sell creativity. And I was like, actually, oh my God, its ability to kind of make what we saw as leaps, almost intuitive leaps, it's really down to the fact it was able to hold far more information than we were able to make. And as a planner, as a strategist, spending my life looking at books and telling creatives, oh, actually, the truth is the audience, this demographic doesn't do it. It was able to hold all that information where I never could. So it's kind of interesting, like all things, the answer's somewhere in between, but I think we have been surprised, generally, and certainly I've seen in our industry, how AI has been able to do things not just reductive, but also sort of constructive.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different themes we talked about. I think one that you mentioned as well was really important is the transparency in the model. I think clinicians particularly are now looking for that explainability. So if they're using any of these models, they want to know why did that come to that decision, because we're entering this sphere now where as somebody who actually applies this in practice, there's a lot more ethical dilemmas, about using the model. If the model tells me this is the output, and I agree with that, am I the one who is liable for if the model was wrong? But what I would like from the model as a clinician is actually know why did it come to that decision? So you want to know that, if it's explainable, that's really helpful. We know a lot of the technologies that underpin, especially LLMs, underpin some of these new technologies coming through in MedTech. Sometimes it's not possible to come to that decision, which is difficult. Also, we need to think about the landscape of AI deployment. So really important in terms of like post-market surveillance as well. So at the moment, I've seen a lot of AI being deployed in very tertiary centres in the UK, and that's also where I thought that AI was going to sort of narrow health inequality. Perhaps at the moment, we're seeing it more concentrated in centres that are doing superbly well. But also, how do we deploy that from a clinical application point of view in these other smaller hospitals across the UK? And that's really challenging because it's going back to my sort of personal interest, AI literacy is really low in terms of application. A lot of clinicians don't know how to apply it. So we really need to get on top of how we train clinicians to use AI safely and effectively. And also in terms of, we don't have the skill set in these trusts, not just here in the UK, but even we're talking further afield in sort of growing economies, for example. How do we actually apply this safely? How do we survey the actual models to make sure that they're still doing what they're meant to be doing? Because they do sort of move over time, don't they? So it's really important that we have a process where there's some really interesting technologies like Newton Street actually looking at this, so they can support AI deployment on more of a wide scale. So I think that's really interesting. But we as clinicians, we need to trust the model that we're deploying.
Yeah.
But really important against with the just to finish in terms of the efficacy against sensitive specificity against what we're already doing, the performance of the model. So if it's better than what we've already got as well, then there will be some unintended consequences. But if on the whole, if the AI's models are a lot better, then we should be looking to use these models if they're providing the value to patients and we're more effective at treating patients.
It's getting harder to know how they work as well.
Yeah.
And we actually have a startup that specializes in trying to figure out how they think. They're not an Oxford startup. They're like they're a YC startup out of Kazakhstan.
Yeah, interesting.
That breaks up like how LLMs work. Yeah, it's very interesting. I completely concur. It's trust. So a lot of healthcare is about power, and trust comes with power, right? So the healer, the doctor, is, in many cultures and communities, the most powerful person. And AI is actually a threat to that power. I'm here to make sure you guys think different things. And but most of what I see is happening in the industry, and has been happening for the past 13 years, has been a question of how do you negotiate that power. And you guys have the power.
I think we have a question from Ali.
Yeah, I had a question also in the area of like LLMs using specifically for diagnosis. As you know, there's a very large controversy around OpenAI, with them scraping huge amounts of data from the internet to train their large language models. And I had two kind of related questions for that, specifically in medicine. Firstly, to get huge amounts of data, some people have proposed using patient data of case files that doctors have made. And obviously there's a huge issue of privacy, so how would you be able to handle that, do you think, in like a responsible, safe way? But on top of that, there's a strong argument to be made that I've seen a couple of times that says a lot of medicine isn't just, and diagnosis specifically, isn't just what's been strictly written in textbooks or in source material you find online. And I hope you would agree with this, but a lot of it comes from practical experience and seeing things in person, and then learning to recognize patterns that you don't necessarily that aren't represented in forms of data like textbooks or descriptions of diseases. And so how would you kind of surmount that in terms of training an AI model in a way that it actually gets access to that data, where it can read on the patterns that are more represented in real life as opposed in a textbook?
So I think the fundamental, there are 2-3 major factors. You'll never trust an engineer to prescribe you drugs, right? So that's the same is true for AI as well. You'll not expect them to prescribe you drugs. So how does that? You have to see AI as an enabler to help you in terms of looking things which a human mind cannot see. So you have experience. The medical doctors will take the final call at least for the near future. But you have to see where some of the things that can be automated in that sense. There are many use cases where you can actually automate parts of things which currently doctors are seeing, and that can then help AI to parallelly build that capability on its own. This would significantly, in the long term, it will significantly improve the access to medicine, because then AI can take certain decisions at a much lower cost compared to the doctor. But and then probably the doctor can see a lot more patients in that sense. You're increasing the productivity of the doctor quite significantly. So we have to see it from that perspective and gradually move to that direction wherein AI learns. One of the good things is AI keeps learning from its things. So that's how the models would actually work. That's the path I see it going. I don't know, medical doctor would be better placed to say that. So.
Yeah, it's difficult because the art of the doctor, we don't want to take that away. Unfortunately, I do think an unintended consequence of AI will be doctors being de-skilled in some capacity. And it's a dilemma for training. How do we make sure that doctors are enabled by the technologies and still know how have a clinical acumen? The role always changes being a doctor, right? It has done over the last 100 years, quite rapidly so. And it's going to happen even more rapidly so across the next decade or two. So it's about how can training adapt to keep up with this pace of AI technology, for example. I think it's really difficult to sort of, so you're talking about that actual application and your assessment. It's really difficult for an AI model to really understand the little cues, everything that you do know. You've trained as a doctor that those interaction with patients, how they look at you, how they tell their story. Even sometimes if patients are telling the truth. And sometimes you have a clinical acumen say, I don't think I'm getting all of the story, or actually I don't think they're telling me the truth. AI will just tell it, word for word, unless you start bringing in, audio, visual, and I'm sure it'll get more complex and have much more multimodal data in the future in these models, but at the moment we're not there. It's just a large language model. It's what you write in it. It actually pulls out the data. So I think over time the AI might get to that point. At the moment, we need to just know how to use this and put the right input so we get the output. Again, with LMMs, it's very difficult to know with this big black box how it comes to that decision making. And you know, you were talking about clinical AI now, and we're talking about actually there's lots of great use cases with non-clinical AI that we're seeing. That's where I think doctors and clinical staff are building trust in these systems. But it hasn't quite, especially LLMs, not quite really taken off in the clinical, especially the regulatory landscape at the moment, which is we could probably sit here talking about it for the next 60 minutes, which is not interesting, but is very important. It's a bit of, there's still a lot of work to do, I think, before we start seeing these co-pilots in hospitals as a regular thing. We're definitely getting there. I know somebody who's gone to the Middle East is working very closely with their LLM, and they're all eyes and ears, and people are very interested if this can make the doctor more efficient. That's never ethical, but I know we can talk about it. If you're going to make me see more patients, is that going to be good for the clinician? Or is that just good for the hospital? That's there's lots of AI tools that do that, and yeah, big ethical dilemma. Am I just going to be more burnt out as a clinician? Is that going to affect retention rates as doctors? Is it going to make me more miserable that I'm not using my clinical acumen and judgment anymore, that I'm just putting everything in an AI machine? You know, it's lots of questions that we don't have the answers to. Again, unintended consequences, but what's for certain is artificial intelligence will enter almost all aspects of healthcare, non-clinical and clinical.
I mean, I think, like you said, non-clinical use of AI, right? So it's giving, there's so much opportunity to give the practitioner more control. And like the cues you mentioned, so most people as a patient, what's really important to them is to feel seen, heard. It's the most scary thing for you. You're in touch with your mortality. So you're trusting this person. Right? We mentioned trust earlier. So, you know, a lot of the opportunity also comes with being able to be effective at, because if I've had situations where a doctor didn't really care very much, and I walked away thinking I don't really need to necessarily listen to what they say, because they didn't really look at me properly. So there's many different angles, and I think it gives you the option to figure out what kind of doctor you want to go to.
Yeah, but it can also enable you, like for example, arrhythmia, there's a major case where a startup is working in terms of early detection and potential alarms can be raised. So then doctor can be, like you can get medical attention. So that helps you in a way to get to that medical state. Otherwise you'll not know till the last minute and then you'll be struggling. So AI is helping in that way.
In the biotech boom, and the drug discovery boom is all exploding. So at Stanford in 2017, my peers were doing research with AI, which now people do in Europe. Like it's built on that, you know. And so back in 17, there was like, we're talking about hundreds of billions being invested in MedTech, in healthcare, in life science, because that was a higher chance of return for VCs. And it's 2025 right now. And like, there's so much to go. And biotech, you know, in 6 years' time, like the way we're talking about AI today, biotech's gonna be really fun.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your insights so far. I'm Gary, I'm currently an engineer. So from what I've seen, a lot of MedTech, biotech solutions, a lot of times they require clinical trials, which can be time-consuming and costly. So especially for new startups in the AI space, the software space, a lot of the patents aren't really that strong, and the big players can easily like overcome them. So how do you see the new startups competing with the big players, which I think it's hard to compete with, like Philips, Siemens.
Yeah. So okay, regulation is, so the FDA, to get FDA approval, you just have to submit a form and hope that no one checks it. That's literally how it works. And CE is better. In India, you just need to know the right person. So if if you have a technology, so I'll give you a very simple example. We have a startup here in Oxford. They can detect glaucoma 5 years in advance. And going to something you said earlier, the data was only 5 years old, so they actually could detect it potentially even more in advance. The liability is probably the stopping block in their introduction. Now, that data, they just went to speculators. Like this is being recorded, so I can't say too much about this. But you know, there's you can get data from many different places, and what is happening with innovation is that people are traveling to different markets in order to get access to different data. But one of the most powerful advantages to a university like Oxford is that Oxford is part of this special club that has incredible vast amount of data available to it. And the question is whether you want to give up what you want to give up in order to access that data or not. The reality is we are seeing business models like Zoe, and we talked about blood testing earlier. Like based on that, I know so anyone with a lab is thinking about how I'm just going to sell cortisol tests and figure out all this other stuff, you know. So I personally would see it as an opportunity. You have a problem you want to solve, right? Then you have another problem. This is your chance to be creative. There's always a way. Because you just have to prove it to someone. And with MedTech, it's very different to pharma. Because you're not necessarily harming the person. You know, it's the interesting thing with MedTech is like applying the pharma business model to something that fundamentally doesn't need it. Yeah?
No, that's fine.
Just add to that. So I'm working at an institute dedicated to commercial translation of medical devices. So we have 3 accelerator programs on that. Some of the most interesting AI ones that we've seen come through are actually university spin-outs. So they're just founded on deep data, which spans over various geographies, various geographies, and length of data as well, how long, and outcomes following that data. So universities are well positioned to access this data with the agreements, with the research that they can conduct. So a lot of this stuff is, you know, being done by PhD students, and then they turn out to great business ideas. Some are research projects that they'll never get into hospitals because the idea is just not commercially viable, actually is not addressing a clinical need. But those that do address a clinical need and is founded on some great data, when you talk about against these big companies, some of these big companies do have the data, but some don't have the data, or they don't have the time. They may put their resources in something else until they realise actually that startup's doing something that I want, and then they might see you as a potential acquirer in the future. So there's lots of people already operating in the space where I think there's still space for the startup and the spin-out, not just these big commercial conglomerates who can build these models. There's still, they don't have the expertise always as well.
Yeah, 100%. And again, from a sort of outside this industry perspective, so fintech, for instance, was where all the money was at 15 years ago, because of obviously open data. And yeah, these big banks, whatever, were trying to incubate innovation internally. I remember we helped Lloyd's of London, their incubation lab, which I use that specifically because Lloyd's of London, lovely, but my God, the culture was wrong. Doesn't work. And even cool companies like EY, you know, when they realise that actually it's so hard to be genuinely innovative when you have layers of approval and you're sitting in the corporate. It's hard to do it, also doesn't typically attract those type of people, even entrepreneurs, horrible expression. So actually what happened very quickly in fintech was they realised that no, they just have to be very good at going out there and finding real, you know, and again it's finance, so there has to be a sort of element of genuine expertise because you can't get this wrong, it's very conservative. So I'd say, yeah, yes, the big boys will have lots of money and people to throw at it, but they have an inherent inability to really drive innovation. Even if they've got the expertise, they often just kill it.
Freedom to operate as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't have that R&D.
Can I tell what you're doing a little bit more? Yeah. So what's very interesting about the program Acts supports and also NHS are doing right now is A, they don't take equity in the same way that universities do. So they're really encouraging a lot of people to go out. It's like 15-20% versus a lot less. Second, there's a lot of different transformation teams at the NHS that are going out of their way to give access to founders trying to build MedTech. Like whole labs, literally just talking founders being like, so Dimitri as an example, where they just want to transform the waiting period, and you're never going to fix it unless you do something about it.
I have two questions. So first, in one of our PPI, which is like a public patient interaction we usually do, we asked, there was a 10% and we asked how much you rate primary care experience 2 years ago and now out of 0 to 5. The surprising was 7 of them rated below than today, means now, 1 then rated equal and only 2 rated better than, So all of them mostly rated it's far worse than earlier it used to be. So what problem do you, on the second hand, when I meet a lot of GPs, so they say we are overburdened and so on and so forth, mainly because of the documentation I believe. So who is happy? Is the NHS happy, patient and doctors are not happy? This is the first question. And the second, if you start today, how will you go about that capture distribution, whether it's a top down from NHS to the hospitals tend to primary care, or you will go bottom up, something like capturing few hospital. A third is like a third party. So these are the two questions. First, who is happy with current system, and then the second, if you start a business today, how will you approach distribution?
Should I have? Yeah.
So NHS for.
No, so I think it would be, you will have to start bottom up in a way. No one is happy, first of all. So
Even innovators are not happy. They couldn't crack the medicine field for many years, I see.
Exactly. So, but then you'll have to start bottom up, try to improve patient experience in various ways. You can automate certain parts of it. GPs are obviously overburdened. That's what all of them claim. So, but yeah, that's questionable as well in certain aspects of it. But yeah, so I think you have to start focusing on aspects which are, let's say, high turnaround times which are there, how to bring that down, how to bring efficiencies into the system. And often the efficiencies are not so much on how the healthcare has been, the medical solution has been provided. It's more about the experience which they get through. How do you change that? And you can obviously align with certain third parties to improve those experiences. Recently, you know that some of the treatments have been passed on to the pharmacists to give certain easy treatments to reduce the burden on the NHS. Many other aspects have been taken care into, but then you have to have a seamless integration. And if you know the NHS data, it sits in so many silos. It's very difficult to manage that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a huge project.
One of the patients was saying, replace GP altogether, put AI. We're laughing altogether because if I have a pain, like leg pain, if I'm not suffering much, I'll not go and report to doctor because 2 months of that much I have to juggle with. Better I'll stay with that pain and try to recover at home.
See, AI can help in many ways, but if you see NHS, by the time you implement a project, it's a huge project, right? So it's already dated technology by the time it comes. So now you on one end you have a GPT on which can answer your questions quite quickly, but then by the time NHS app will have something similar, it will be 5 years already, and something else new would come. So no one will be happy in that sense. The whole idea is to how to improve care and try to see over a period of time how that will be, because you're always comparing something which is on, let's say, on an app which is on phone technology, which is very latest, with something which NHS can implement. It will take time. So it will never be, no one will be ever happy in that sense, but yeah.
Yeah, in healthcare there is something called reference or evidence cited. So have you heard of open evidence? So they cite whatever, it's like a GPT version only, like LLM only, but whatever the response, they'll give you reference. It's like a perplexity of our AIs.
Yeah.
So will all the supports, if AI is giving, the LLM is giving, if it will be supported by some claim through, let's say the guidelines we have, nice, everything like supported by that, will GP now will be happy to take those, or still they have some concerns to think around?
I guess the question for me is this a medical device? Is it given, is the intended use of this AI,
Mm-hmm.
this is the difficult bit, and intended use is usually very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So these large language models, you can put in sort of anything and everything and they'll give you something back. It's not a specific use case, someone's coming in with back pain and then I'm going to get like a management plan based on deep machine learning. It's much more wider than that. It's difficult. If it's just giving me guidance and guidelines,
Yeah.
I can see quite a low hanging fruit. As a clinician, I'm really busy. I might want to get the guidelines really quickly, type in, right, I've got a patient, I need to give you some guidelines on back pain, and summarise the nice guidelines that tells me about, how to manage this back pain. I guess, there are, that could be useful.
Yeah.
But it's on me as the clinician. Am I giving patient details? So that's firstly, a lot of these aren't built to take personal and they don't provide information. But if I'm just using it for guidelines, it's a bit different. And it's on me then to actually check the guidelines and read it to make sure that what it's giving me is correct. It could be very helpful. I can see how that might work.
Yeah. So currently, like you search the conditions on the NICE and then find out the PDF which are relevant, and then you see out of which paragraph is relevant to that.
Yeah, it's actually very difficult.
Yeah. Again, you see which demography the patient is, gender, age, and then you find out which sentence and action point you do currently. Right. This is how currently you do.
Yeah. NICE guidelines are not easy to navigate. But I imagine NICE are probably looking at ways of using LLMs to actually improve the use of their system.
Currently we are working on that project. It's like given the EHR itself, the personal demography along with your query, that the conditions will give you whatever will be the guidelines, what is the action plan according to that. So my point was, if it is a cited, everything is cited, like reference, why it is said. So will the clinician have a lot of confidence in the system? Because interpretation is not going to happen. Experimentation is not going to happen in next 2 years as well. Because model has grown by such a size, it's not at all possible in next 2 years. I am in healthcare field LLM for AI for last 5 years. The scale we have grown in model parameter size, it's humongous. So explainability is not going to come down in terms of chart and flow and something like why model did. But reference is working. Like why I said this, it's reference is that. It could be PDF, it could be internet, it could be some other local sources. So will it get the GPs or doctors confidence in the system and they're happy to go with that rather than going towards explainability and all?
I think if it was endorsed by a national body, or it had that sort of endorsement behind it, then we'd be confident. I think the big issue here is we all know, I think there was a survey, how many doctors are actually using ChatGPT. A lot of them are using it, and we should not be using it for clinical care, but people are using it because they find it quite useful. Therefore, how do we actually build a LLM that actually works and is safe and very explainable, if not explainable in the way we talk about it, cited and referenced and is actually evidence-based medicine. But again, it depends how they summarise the information. It's difficult.
There's a YC startup who wants that.
Is looking at this.
No, they built it 2 years ago. LLM just based on citations.
Yeah.
But there's so many challenges, and then the trust, it still hallucinates because it's still built on a model that does that.
I think that's the issue, is the confidence in the model again. If it hallucinates again, which they do, it's.
Yeah, so in a way you said if national body approve that, I'm happy to use. But national body says GP approves that, then we are happy to take it.
Well, sorry. I mean, so getting a bunch of GPs to, it's like you need to set up a society here in Oxford. You need to get a list of names that want the society.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of principle. It's a resource management problem. So how do you convince someone that something's worth their time? You show them that people care about it. But from a go-to-market perspective, which is, if I understood part of your question correctly, is how do you go take a product and sell it within the space? At the moment, you have a huge flux in this country. So there's a greater push for private. And if that increases, the more insurance becomes more important. Convincing them. With the NHS, so our most successful, it's called INEX, they've just rechanged their name, but they do facilities management, so they don't actually focus on kind of healthcare. They work with over 5 trusts. Did his PhD, basically got pissed off, did the research, and they actually make money. But these changes that Alex is talking about, this is like happening as we speak. So there's a lot to come, but if in some cases, go find a charity and give the stakeholders your solution and show that data.
I see.
Yeah. Like, again, I'm saying in like other countries.
Yeah.
There's just
Because few GPs also have, GP centers have some sort of bandwidth. They can take some product as a third party or vendor, right? They have some sort of, as far as I know. But the second thing, if you go top down, if it is approved by NHS, it's very easy to dip down the market.
I think at the end of the day, the priority for me is patient safety. And
Exactly.
I think this is the issue with guidelines. If you said, I follow this LLM, and actually the output was wrong, but it wasn't, endorsed by, on the NHS procurement marketplace, or hadn't gone through the right regulatory, hadn't gone through all the right to get to the place it needs to get to. It's at the moment we're not seeing many of these technologies come through, even though we can see how useful they are. And despite the need from doctors, clearly, because they're using this technology when they shouldn't be, to prompt them, in terms of their learning. But it's such a challenge to get into the hands of clinicians at the moment, just because of the way the models are built and hallucinations and whatnot.
So it's something slightly less riskier in that sense, wherein we design, let's say, health economic studies or something of that sort, where again we have to do the referencing quite accurately. The problem comes is, even though if you refer it to certain paper which was published, it might have a different context altogether. There are so many issues there. Which is the latest paper? What is the patient pool it was addressed to? All that reference mapping LLMs can do. Still, no one trusts it as of now. That's the thing, because you get the outcome. It probably reduces the amount of search which you have to do, but still it's a search engine. It's not something which you'll use, like many of the health economists or market access people don't use it. They use it for, extracting information from, let's say, a PubMed or that kind of a website, extracting that information, referencing it, trying to identify studies probably humanly was not possible earlier, but then they don't use it in that sense, because there might be a study which was not published on that platform, which is much more recent.
Yeah, paywall is again another issue. The second one is sometimes it resonates with author name who never published, they put it there.
Exactly. So that's why we are trying to build a platform wherein all the papers are validated, and then you ring fence that. That's the approach which we are following. But then I see on the clinical side, like on the clinician side, for example, it will be way more challenging to accept it. I know I cannot name the company, but there's someone who's doing this in the Middle East, wherein they are trying to monetize the data from that perspective, and trying to get, let's say, clinicians to use these kinds of LLMs. So far, clinicians are not so hell-bent on it.
I mean, the space that I'm most excited about within health tech is like being able to use these models to recreate like a digital twin of physiology in order to be able to test and practice what would work or wouldn't work. And that it's a lot of compute, but we're getting there. It's
Yes, go questions.
Just following up from what you said, I'm quite curious to know what you're all most excited by or most hopeful for the use of AI in medicine.
what are you excited about?
No, I think
Being more tight. No, I'm joking.
no, I think this. On the health economics side, when the LLMs will be able to tell what could be the study endpoints, how that would, like, based on what product you are trying to offer, what is the target which you're trying to achieve. AI should be able to tell me that, and the moment we reach that stage where it looks very reliable, that will considerably reduce the cost of doing clinical studies, because a lot of it is currently trial and error kind of a thing. And that will be I think, in the next 5 years or something, if we see something which is very efficient on that side, that would be amazing, because then that would, I know some of the biostatisticians will not be happy about it, but this is where it will be really helpful, because it reduces the cost so significantly. I don't know what would excite you.
I do believe as a clinician, anything that can support me to deliver more direct care for patients is a big win. And I think there will be a lot of AI technologies that do help. At the moment, I think we went through this period of going from paper to digital. Some people still doing that now, like my trust. Which we thought, oh, that's going to make us more effective and we'll be able to see patients more frequently. It didn't really happen like that. We've had more burnout since we introduced EPRs. So I'm quite interested in how the next generation of EPR might look, and I've seen a bit of a glimpse with that from the provider that we signed a contract with. And it looks truly intuitive to use. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a game changer. I think it should release time to care instead of doing a lot of documentation, all the stuff that we don't really enjoy doing. We just want to see patients and do what we want to do. So that's quite exciting. I think if that gives us the gift of actually, I think, connecting with patients again, that for me is exciting, because I felt like as a doctor sometimes I was never able to give patients my full self, which is what I really wanted to do. And this is what we're talking about AI. We talk about AI, it's going to make us more efficient. That means that you just want me to see more patients for this so little time I've got. I don't think that's too exciting. It's quite exciting for the hospital because they make more money or get their backlog down. But as a clinician, I want to be able to give more high quality care. Sometimes that means more time with my patient to explain things, which they really appreciate. That real care element again. I know so many times I brush past people in A&E and quickly giving them results and not really explaining it fully because we don't have time. I feel like getting back to basics by giving us a bit more time to do that, because we're so stretched and we're just getting more stretched and stretched. If AI can release more time to give that care, I think that's quite exciting. There's loads of different types of technologies that hopefully will help us get to that place. But that's quite exciting for me. Yeah, but we need to make sure we know clinicians know how to use this technology as well, which is a pretty big red flag for me at the moment, is that it's coming thick and fast, and clinicians in terms of their digital and data science literacy is probably quite low, generally. As I said, most of my consultants have been using paper for years. They don't understand the concept of good data input and how to actually make sure we can capture data so we can better inform our care that we deliver to patients. So actually training staff how to use these technologies is key, and at the moment I think we're still quite a long way about that. There's some good initiatives like the clinical AI program, GSTT, it's countrywide now, is at the top of fellowship, for example, but generally digital literacy is quite low, and people don't really understand how these technologies can really affect them in the next decade, and I think that can be quite worrying because it's going to come very far, so we do need to make sure we train the workforce how to use these. Otherwise, technologies can be used ineffectively or unsafely as well. So that's another thing that I'm very focusing on, also very mindful of in my space. But
You talked about power earlier. I think that's a really interesting concept in any innovation. And there's obviously potential for that power to be concentrated, etc. But again, if I take a parallel with fintech, so fintech initially promised much. If you think about where I was in the 90s and noughties, changing bank accounts. Actually, when I finished as a student, I had a student loan and a big overdraft. I actually lied. I said I was a medic and they gave me £5,000. I was doing English. No, my mate was lived with a bunch of medics. And I say, doing medicine, we'll give you loads of money. So I got loads of money. And then I was like, right, moved back home. I was like, going to transfer my bank account from my student account to where I was living. It took almost a year. And I was like, yes, they've forgotten the fact that I owed them loads of money. And a year, just literally, someone was telling me, but not true, if it's not done within a year, you keep the money, it's gone. Not true. But the point is, compare that to today, where we are in terms of finance, ability to send money, receive money, etc., etc. And the point is, the power used to be with the banks entirely. You used to go begging to them for a loan. As a businessman, they had to go begging. Now that power dynamic has massively changed. But we've got to educate ourselves about it. So clean tech is my area. What I love about people who are engaged in the energy revolution is they suddenly feel empowered. You're not just getting a bill which fluctuates randomly, from month to month based on gas wholesale prices and all sorts of really stuff, and Putin involved in Ukraine. I've got solar and batteries in my house. I'm in control, and that's taking time. And now that's the early adopters. But that's the exciting bit, is that I think here, it's not just about time, they're exactly right. Time, what does time give you? Time gives you the ability to think. It gives you the ability to make decisions, to be creative, to actually start to go from being a passive consumer or advice from a doctor who doesn't have enough time to really see you as a person, see you, or frankly is getting burnt out, to him or her feeling more empowered by having better knowledge, to you feeling that you're empowered but also having better knowledge. That's the exciting bit. And the thing is, that can sound like silly, story-eyed optimism, but you've seen it in other areas. And you've seen it in other areas where suddenly the consumers and also the professionals are far more empowered. That's, I think, the exciting, it's not specific technology, but it's a social outcome, I think, is amazing.
There's something we haven't really talked about, which is, it's funny, in the past 3 months, every time I've spoken in public, I always talk about biohacking. So, and I find it interesting. So when Samantha and I first met, the strategic focus for a lot of countries in Asia, Southeast Asia and South Asia was how do we improve wellness? How do we empower, educate people to be healthier, right? And that's really something that AI is doing very effectively. 5 a day as a campaign is one of the most successful campaigns in the world to get people to think. My cousin literally, he bases his nutrition based on 5 a day, right? And so there's a lot of stuff here in primary care and education that people don't really talk about. 30% of India has diabetes. Very easy to sort that out, with just an hour walk to some extent. Eating different things. It's not about oil. There's so much stuff that can go in, and so we are getting so much more empowered to understand ourselves with the technology, and that's really that's fundamental, and it fits with power, because then the patient has power.
Yeah. We're seeing this very early now. Patients are coming in and they're much more educated about their diagnoses or treatment plans, which is only a good thing, in my opinion. Dilemma for us sometimes, because they sometimes know as much as we do, we feel like. So we've got to be on our ball game at all times. But it's definitely empowering patients to take health into their own hands, which is only a great thing, right? That they know themselves and they can do it, as long as it's based on high quality evidence, and not nonsense. That's the most important thing. Evidence-based medicine but empowering the patient to take matters into their own control.
Yeah, one interesting, just to take on that is post-surgery visits, GP visits, hospitals always try to reduce those. And that's where this works very well. AI has helped a lot in terms of reducing and educating the patient post-surgery so that they don't just keep visiting back again and again and increasing the costs. And that's where, because it's in control of the doctor to a large extent, and if there's some problem, then they can always connect to the doctor. And I've seen many successful cases there, and that will help your cause as well in terms of trying to how to make patients happier.
Because they don't want to go to the hospital either.
Yeah, yeah. So they were like, I don't know why primary care and secondary care don't talk to each other.
Do you know that famous case study about the single thing that improved satisfaction of the London Underground? Do you know this example? It wasn't faster trains, it wasn't better trains, it wasn't less stinky tunnels, it was gone.
Was it Wi-Fi?
Although I would agree.
It was actually having boards which tell you when the train's going to arrive.
Yeah.
Just reducing that uncertainty. There was a time when we didn't have those, and imagine just you have a clue when the next train's arrive. Could be 10 minutes, could be 2 minutes, It just started to tell people, suddenly everyone was much happier with waiting. It's just about knowing. Just knowledge gives you so much more sense of ability to control your own destiny. And that's what we see here. It sounds like a trivial example, but that's how we are wired. The most corrosive thing, it's not fear, it's uncertainty. Humans are really programmed to hate loads of uncertainty. And that destroys trust. And if you don't trust in something like a medical situation, that can be actually physically damaging to your health.
Because people feel they lose control when they don't know. And have you ever been to Lisbon?
Yeah.
So it's like 13 minutes on average to wait. So there's a lot of scheduling and supply chain. There's really good stuff, right? And it's always very interesting how some industries are good at using it more than others. But there's like a magic number where if you wait too long, like I had to wait over a year to get diagnosed with long COVID. Yeah, it just sucks, right? You don't know what the fuck's going on. And so I took it into my own hands. Didn't diagnose it long COVID, but figure out that I had other issues, sorted those out. So it's, with AI and technology, we just have that kind of thing. But you're right, like knowing is...
Yeah, just to add on, we asked why is your rating low. It was not quality. So it was more of a logistic. And why I'm not getting appointment? Why my GP always see watch 8 minutes, okay, 2 minutes left. So these kind of things were then to me quite uncomfortable. Why primary care? I have to make a good story to convince my GP to give me a referral letter so that I can go to secondary care. So these kind of problems they were facing, not it was more of a quality.
So unfortunately we have run out of time because we got to get these wonderful people to a formal. But it was lovely seeing all of you here. It was lovely, having you guys to give you insightful information. But
Oh, we overran by 10 minutes. There's just so much to talk about. I mean, hopefully we get you guys back in another time. I mean, it was genuinely good discussion. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.